Story 1. An individual who defrauds a company is subject to criminal court. When a company defrauds an individual, the matter is handled in civil court. Story 2. Look at the sentences for breaking and entering compared to bank robbery. Story 3. Lie on your application for insurance? Jail time. Company lies to you during a valid insurance claim? Maybe a fine, but good luck getting the government to agree. Story 4. Corporations are punished with fines. Citizens go to jail. Corporations do not even have to shut down their business if they knowingly or negligently kill or hurt millions of people. Story 5. Civil asset forfeiture is unjust. Law enforcement can take your property without charging you with a crime, and you must prove your innocence to recover it. Meanwhile, corporations lobby for tax loopholes that allow them to pay very little, while ordinary people face heavy burdens. The system is biased in favor of those with money and power. Story 6. Let's say I agree with a shop owner to work in their store for $2,000 a week cash. On payday, the boss decides I have not worked hard enough and only gives me $1,900. To get the $100 I am owed, I need to find an attorney at my own cost and sue the employer, which will be much more expensive. Alternatively, if I take $100 extra from the cash register on payday, my boss can call the police. They will arrest and prosecute me at taxpayer expense. The taxpayer-funded prosecutors will seek restitution of that $100 and give it to the store owner. Story 7. Not a law, but the fact that they bailed out the banks during 2008 tells a lot. Story 8. The Dodge versus Ford Motors ruling stated that a corporation must always act in the best interest of shareholders. Typically, this means maximizing profit above all else. Story 9. Corporate personhood. An individual breaks the law and goes to jail. If someone dies, they can face the death penalty. A corporation or limited liability company breaks the law and receives a fine. If their assets are held by a holding company, they can simply close and reopen under a different license without missing a beat. If they cause a death or multiple deaths, generally no one faces jail time except in cases of gross negligence. It does not take gross negligence or incompetence for an individual to see jail time. In fact, it does not even require actual malice or premeditation to receive the death penalty in this country. Yet if a legal entity with money pollutes the land, causes babies to be born with birth defects, and cancer rates are noticeably higher than average, the state's hands are tied. Story 10. A worker stealing millions from the company results in jail time. A company stealing millions from its workers results in a fine. Story 11. How many people were killed because of DuPont and Teflon coating? This was a known issue at DuPont. They hid the facts while telling everyone it was safe. They were fined, but it was less than the profit Teflon generated. What's more concerning is they slightly changed the chemical formula for nonstick coatings and claimed it was safe, but it really is not. The government has not taken sufficient action. DuPont also created Freon, which caused significant damage to the atmosphere, and they were aware of it. Story 12. Read about the impact of the Citizens United decision on the lives of citizens. Story 13. If I steal $1,000 from the register, I am fired, arrested, and probably go to jail. If my manager alters my time entries and takes $1,000 from my paycheck over the course of a year, he will probably be promoted to general manager. Even if it is discovered, they might only have to pay a fine. Story 14. Most of them. Citizens United is problematic when you realize the extent to which money has influenced politics. Just look at campaign spending figures since that court case. The amounts are staggering. Story 15. I definitely think the tax code has many loopholes that wealthy individuals use to avoid paying taxes. Story 16. Limits on how much a company can be fined are extremely low. They can be fined large sums of money in high-profile cases, but the actual fine is quietly set to the maximum amount, which is only pennies compared to the original fine. Story 17. Wage theft is the most common form of theft and results in a fine if the company is caught. However, if you or I were to take $3 billion a year from people we know, we would be in jail for the rest of our lives. Story 18. You are going to have to be more specific. There is a lot. Story 19. Bankruptcy law. If you make more than the median income, You cannot file a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. This law was enacted to prevent citizens from abusing the bankruptcy system, but most of the debt discharged in Chapter 7 bankruptcy is owed to corporations. Although personal debts owed to individuals can be discharged through bankruptcy, the vast majority of credit card, vehicle, and mortgage debt is owed to corporations. After this law passed, it became easier for corporations to extend credit to people who could not afford to repay it. Story 20. The entire concept of a corporation is to create an entity that has protections which individuals do not, in order to make doing business possible and smoother. This is not necessarily a bad thing. In some cases, we need more restrictions to protect individuals, but in other cases, it would be impossible to do business without these protections. Story 21. Not a law, but Citizens United 2011, and most other recent Supreme Court decisions on corporate personhood. Also the Supreme Court decision on Walmart stores versus Dukes, 2011, which held that the 1.5 million women employees alleging sex discrimination did not have enough in common to form a class for a class action suit. Whenever the modern Supreme Court has had the opportunity to rule in favor of corporations, it does. I expect these kinds of decisions to continue throughout the reign of the Roberts Court, either until it is reformed or until many of the current justices die or retire. Story 22. State laws mandate the existence of automobile dealerships. Story 23. I present to you last week tonight's segment on deferred prosecution agreements. Story 24. Corporate bankruptcy laws. Individuals filing bankruptcy face long-term damage to credit and fewer protections, while corporations can restructure debt under Chapter 11, continue operating, and shed liabilities such as pensions or contracts with far less personal consequence. Story 25. In many states, it is illegal for an individual to purchase and own a firearm suppressor, but they can legally purchase and register it under a limited liability company. Story 26. Corporations can take out a life insurance policy in your name with themselves as the beneficiary. Story 27. Not a law per se, but corporate personhood and Citizens United Supreme Court decisions, along with limited liability companies, really insulate corporate criminals. Softer white-collar crime sentencing and prisons. The general structure of American society benefits corporations with reduced taxation and regulations. Story 28. Corporations receive the same legal protections as individuals, but they cannot be imprisoned. Story 29. Citizens United gives corporations equal voting power to individuals, but corporations have significantly more money to influence politicians. It needs to be abolished, along with Congress's ability to buy and trade stocks in industries they control or have insider knowledge of. Story 30. Businesses only pay taxes on money made after expenses. The rest of us pay taxes and then pay for our expenses with what is left. Story 31. Don't even have to get into laws. What happens when you owe a business money versus a business owing you money? You better pay immediately or they add fees. Want to pay by card, debit, or credit? It doesn't matter. There's a fee no matter how you pay, unless you had the foresight to notarize a check and mail it 2 weeks ago. The business can delay collecting for as long as they want. Especially if it is not a court-enforced payment, they will also take deductions for various reasons. We cannot charge interest or fees. Story 32. If you rob a bank, you get prison time. If a bank steals from customers, it pays a fine less than what was stolen. If you scam an insurance company, you get prison for insurance fraud. If an insurance company scams the customer, nothing happens. If you sell opioids on the street, you get prison. If Purdue Pharma pushes opioids, it pays a fine less than what was distributed. Story 33. In most United States jurisdictions, contract law does not allow for the recovery of attorney's fees in cases of breach of contract. Therefore, in order for a lawsuit to be worthwhile, you either need substantial disposable income or must be confident that you will recover more than you spend on legal fees. Story 34. Citizens United. You can tell by the name how unethical it is. It grants corporations the right of free speech to interfere in elections by allowing them to lobby and fund superpolitical action committees. It is based on the idea that a megacorporation is just as much a person as you or me, which is laughable to all but the Supreme Court and politicians. Story 35. Citizen United versus the Federal Election Commission drastically changed how financing elections work, benefiting corporations. Story 36. Would it not be easier to find a law that does the opposite? Story 37. A corporation that breaks the law receives a fine. A citizen who breaks the law receives jail time. Story 38. Recording a video at a factory farm, such as a chicken farm in the United States of America, is a felony and can result in decades in prison. I dislike the people for the ethical treatment of animals, but they do have the right to reveal the cruelty to which our food is subjected. Story 39. Workers' compensation laws are completely set up to disadvantage workers. Some of the laws and rules are very bad. Story 40. The most common form of theft in the United States is wage theft, which mostly goes unpunished. I will believe a corporation is a person when Texas finds a way to execute one. Story 41. When corporations get tax breaks for job creation but lay off employees or automate everything anyway, who is really being protected? The system rewards power, not accountability. Story 42. The Digital Millennium Copyright Act. First, it makes breaking a digital lock illegal. What is a digital lock? Any form of copy protection and tamper-proofing that prevents you from doing what you wish with what you purchased. But that was to prevent people from making thousands of digital copies and distributing them worldwide. That was already illegal, made so by laws established before 8mm projectors were the primary method of watching movies at home. Loading a new operating system onto your phone? Illegal under the Digital Millennium Copyright Act if you have a locked-down bootloader. Homebrew on your Nintendo Wii? Also illegal. Transferring your Blu-ray to your phone? That is a violation. It is supposed to set safe harbor laws for websites so things like social media and comment sections can exist. Instead, because platform and publisher are so ill-defined, anyone can claim to be a platform to dodge responsibility while also claiming the right to have strict editorial policies dictating tone and content on their site. Meanwhile, try to start a new one and you have to fight in court when you try to follow these laws as the same corporations attempt to smear you. The whole thing is a mess and should be rewritten. It should never be illegal to break a lock. It should be illegal to access something you do not own or to damage something you do not own. But if you own something, you should be able to do what you wish with it without asking the original equipment manufacturer for permission. Story 43. All of them, corporations operate under different rules. Story 44. Laws do not protect anyone. They provide a means for prosecution when violated. Story 45. The punishment for wage theft is inadequate. The punishment for regular theft is more severe. Story 46. Not a law per se, but Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission really harmed us by allowing unlimited amounts of money to be spent on campaigns. Despite its name, citizens have never been more divided, and I consider this a major factor. Story 47. The punishment for wage theft can be as low as eventually paying back stolen wages. Imagine I steal $2,000 from your wallet, money you were going to spend on bills, food, and housing. Even if you fight the theft, you must go without the money until someone forces me to repay it. 3 months later, I get caught. Your bills have late fees, you have missed meals, and your landlord is angry and demanding payment. The cost to you is more than $2,000. But my only punishment is returning the stolen money and being told, "Don't do it again, please." Story 48. It would be easier to list the laws that clearly protect the citizens more than corporations. Story 49. Citizen United. Corporations are people and money is free speech. Story 50. They said the police protection is for buildings. I do not know if it is a law, but they do live up to that oath. Story 51. Over $50 billion of wage theft occur in the United States per year. This is a civil matter. Story 52. Corporations are considered people through corporate personhood. Story 53. But of the 14th Amendment cases brought before the Supreme Court between 1890 and 1910, 19 dealt with African Americans, 288 dealt with corporations. Howard Zinn, A People's History of the United States. This has only gotten worse. Example: Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission. Story 54. All of them, but especially the legality of arbitration agreements, which deprive American citizens of their constitutional right to a public jury trial. Story 55. The at-will employment law means that employers can terminate your employment without providing a reason. You can lose your job at any time. Story 56. The 14th Amendment indirectly gave corporations many of the same protections as individuals. Story 57. It is too difficult to pierce the corporate veil, allowing corporate officers to avoid accountability by claiming their actions were part of their corporate duties. Story 58. Not a law, but every human resources department exists solely to protect the business from whatever you do. Story 59. Any law that allows fines for the company to be less than the profit it made on illegal actions is ineffective. If it is not profit plus penalty, then there is little incentive for shareholder-first CEOs to operate within legal boundaries. Story 60. If Monsanto's genetically modified plants drift onto an organic farm, Monsanto can sue the organic farmers for patent infringement, even though they did not ask for or intend to grow genetically modified crops. The farmers will lose organic certification, face a lawsuit, and be out of business permanently. Story 61. Have you ever heard the phrase corporations are people too? You hear politicians saying this when they campaign. This is a subtle nod to their corporate supporters. There is legislation that allows corporations to identify as United States citizens. Why is this important? Corporations can invoke their constitutional rights to protect themselves from the government. Best example: 1. The 2008 housing market crash happens. 2. Banks get bailed out, and as a punishment, the government will own a certain percentage of their company. It is unclear if this was indefinitely or until the bailout money was paid back. 3. The banks accepted the deal. 4. After public outrage over the bailout died down, the banks sued the government, invoking their Eighth Amendment rights, saying the government owning part of their company was cruel and unusual punishment. The banks won, and it was back to business as usual. Story 62. Copyright laws. Yes, I would download a car. Sometimes, something I want to watch is not available on any of the services I pay for. Story 63. Regular theft laws versus wage theft laws. Wage theft is the #1 type of theft in the United States and results in over $50 billion a year stolen from workers, but you do not get to call the police. Meanwhile, if you steal from them, even something minor, they do get to call the police and you have a black mark on you for life. Story 64. The fact that you can waive your right to a jury trial in most end-user license agreements. Story 65. Basically, any kind of criminal law applies because you cannot imprison a corporation. Story 66. Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission is a landmark United States Supreme Court case that dramatically changed the landscape of campaign finance. Decided in 2010, the court ruled that the government cannot restrict independent expenditures for political communications by corporations, including nonprofit corporations, labor unions, and other associations. This decision expanded the definition of free speech to include corporate spending in elections. Before this ruling, laws limited the amount of money corporations and unions could spend on political advocacy. The court's decision held that under the First Amendment, political spending is a form of protected speech, and the government cannot suppress that speech based on the speaker's corporate identity. The ruling led to a significant increase in political spending by outside groups, often referred to as super political action committees or super PACs. These entities can raise and spend unlimited amounts of money to advocate for or against political candidates, provided they do not coordinate directly with campaigns. Critics argue that this decision gives disproportionate influence to wealthy corporations and special interest groups, undermining the democratic process. Supporters claim it protects free speech and allows for greater participation in political discourse. Overall, Citizens United reshaped campaign finance by removing many restrictions on political spending by corporations and unions, raising ongoing debates about the role of money in politics. Story 67. Free speech applies to corporations more than you sometimes realize. Story 68. When a person does something wrong, they face a fine or prison time. When a corporation does something wrong, they face a fine, even if the staff who committed or ordered the wrongdoing are identified. That fine is often negotiated with a regulatory agency. Even after negotiating it down to almost nothing, they can challenge the fine in court. For banks, it is even more complex. The bank is required to hire an agency for oversight. They pay the agency enough to cover the wages of the staff performing oversight, some profit, office space for the staff, and expenses like computers and office supplies. If the staff performing oversight find issues, the bank can fire that agency, often resulting in job losses, and hire a different agency. Story 69. At-will employment, which is legal in 49 states, allows companies to end employment at any time. Proponents say it works both ways, but it mainly lets companies terminate employees whenever they choose. In every menial job I have had, the first thing mentioned in the job training manual is at-will employment, with statements like at-will employment supersedes everything written in this manual, even if it appears to contradict at-will employment. Story 70. All I know is that I am getting angrier as I read these. Time for a coffee. Story 71. How is Citizens United not the top answer? Story 72. What is the punishment for a corporation that removes the tag from a mattress? Story 73. Arthur Andersen LLP versus United States. Arthur Andersen LLP was found guilty by the jury for obstruction of justice after destroying documents related to Enron, the company involved in the Enron scandal. Because of this, the company lost its license to audit other public companies and was dissolved. Essentially, the United States government managed to shut down a company. Arthur Andersen appealed to the Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit, which affirmed the guilty verdict. They then appealed to the Supreme Court of the United States. The Supreme Court, with a unanimous opinion, overturned Arthur Andersen's guilty verdict. Despite this, Arthur Andersen remained dissolved. As a result, the United States government typically does not bring companies to criminal court, but instead sues them civilly. Consequently, some companies, such as banks related to the 2008 financial crisis, HSBC, involved with money from drug cartels, and Boeing, issues related to the 737 MAX, were not charged under criminal law. Story 74. If I steal $10 from Walmart, I get arrested. If Walmart steals $10 from me, it is a billing error. Story 75. Having auto insurance is required by law. Some insurance companies are dishonest and refuse to pay. Story 76. The entire legal system, to be honest. Imagine how insane I would sound if I said, hey, let's bring back trial by combat. But to keep it somewhat fair, we can allow someone to hire a champion, or the champion can volunteer. You would immediately see the issue. Well, couldn't wealthy people just hire the best champions, basically benefiting the rich and allowing them to use this system as a tool to keep hoarding wealth? How is a working-class person supposed to fight a big corporation that can hire professional fighters and have gyms that exist solely to provide the best fighters? Oh, but we use words instead of fists, so it's okay. Don't think about it. The legal system is totally fair, and there is no bias toward the rich. Story 77. If I am a large corporation and gamble away all my money on a risky bet, the taxpayers will pay my debts while I buy back my stocks. If an individual loses all their money on a risky bet, they will lose everything and may be further fined and jailed for unpaid debts. Story 78. The situation where companies cannot be sued for vaccine injuries. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.